Hey folks, here OS Reviews. You're watching our retro review or throwback review of the original iPhone 2G. This was the first iPhone to be released by Apple back in June of 2007 and actually came with a pretty hefty price tag. In fact, unlocked at the time, you could pick one up for about $700 online at Amazon and eBay, so very expensive. At the same time, it was kind of the grandfather, or the first true modern smartphone, at least in my opinion, because it offered applications like Safari, Google Maps, iTunes, pinch to zoom support, and also the ability to have fully enabled kind of desktop versions of websites, and overall that capacitive screen made a huge difference compared with older resistive touchscreens incorporated on earlier smartphones that ran on Windows Mobile predominantly. Now there were some other devices at the time that was also a bit, kind of hyped, such as the HTC Touch, the original one, but that had a resistive touchscreen, and also the LG Prada, which is the first smartphone in the first feature phone in the world to have a capacitive screen, and it actually came out before the iPhone did. But the iPhone is the first one that kind of merges up these modern features that we have in today's smartphones still, like these Google applications, like the access to the actual marketplace to download more applications, the App Store, also having the iPod feature. So the first device that's really simplistic and easy to use and incorporates all the modern days features that a smartphone really should have. In terms of design, it still is pretty classical. It offers a home key on the bottom. It has this nice tempered glass screen that resists too much smudges, although it's still a little bit weak under direct sunlight. Now the density here is only about 165, so compared with today's Retina screens, it's extremely low, but at the time actually was pretty good. And you can still see that images look pretty good on the screen, especially if you're not doing too much web browsing and reading too much text. It still does a pretty good job in terms of color reproduction. And the top features the time date information, and finally there is the earpiece. The top device features a headphone jack, which was one of the main deficiencies or flaws of the original iPhone. It was very much recessed, so for those of you who don't remember, basically if you had a L-tipped headphone jack where it was kind of bent on one side, it wouldn't fit into this jack. You had to have a straight down, a very slim connector, so only a select few of headsets at the time could fit into this jack just because of the fact that it was really recessed and really deep. You can see how thick the aluminum here is, so really good construction quality, which is great on Apple's part, but they made the headphone jack kind of way too down. It's almost like a tunnel, so that was a flaw at the time. There's also a built-in full-size SIM card removed via a paper clip, and also a power on and off switch that's tactile and easy to press. The left-hand side features a lock switch for the screen, also a volume rocker that's a one-piece design. And the bottom features a stereo speakers and also the 30-pin dock connector for charging and syncing. The back features just a 2-megapixel fixed focus camera, so it was a weak point even at the time because the Motorola Razr came out a year or two before this phone did, and that came with a 1.3 megapixel camera, or at least later generations, the slightly modified version did, and this is only 2 megapixels, and the Razr was only a feature phone. So Apple definitely improved on the aspect of the camera throughout the later generations of the iPhone models, and this is quite evident as well because the first iPhone actually did not have any actual video recording capabilities. It only had a camera. So to take video, you had to download a third-party application through the App Store. The back features the infamous Apple logo, and the aluminum finish is still quite attractive. It kind of takes us full circle back to the iPhone 5 with the same finish. Of course, now the new iPhones are a bit more squared off, but this still kind of resembles what I would classify as kind of a Mac-esque look from the plastic and all the aluminum finish, so it is pretty classy in terms of looks and designs. The bottom also features the antenna part and some Apple information. The first generation iPhone also came in pretty interesting memory capacities. It came in 4, 8, and 16 gigabyte capacities, and so the 4 gig capacity, of course, is no longer available in the market, but at the time it was still sufficient for most folks, unless you had a ton of songs or movies you wanted to play in the device's memory. It could still hold quite a charge. The product itself also came equipped with a host of wireless features, from Wi-Fi to a GPS to Bluetooth to 2G Edge speeds. Again, 3G was actually not present on this particular phone, but 3G was already inherent in the marketplace by 2007. So it was kind of a concern at the time, along with the headphone jack on an otherwise pretty flawless device at the time. Otherwise, battery life was still pretty good, and even in today's standards, it's not a bad battery life at all. It can easily last you about 2 days, 3 days before you have to recharge it if you still have a good battery on it, which is pretty impressive considering a lot of larger devices today with larger screens with larger than 3.5-inch screens tend to run out of juice by the end of the day. But that was that at the time. So the camera itself, again, it's fixed focus, which means that, again, it's not going to be the best for focusing on macro shots or for faraway shots, but it's also not the worst either. It's just very simplistic. There isn't too much going on. It's very easy to snap a shot, very easy to see what you've snapped, but at the same time, it's not, again, the best in terms of resolution or anything like that. So there we go, we snapped the quick image. You can see how pinch to zoom is very lucid and responsive, even at the time. The phone only came again with a 433 megahertz processor, so not even 1 gigahertz, not anything like that, not quad core at all. But it was still pretty impressive because at the time, again, it still manages to run very, very smoothly. It just shows that iOS is an operating system, at least at the time, very much optimized for lower processors at the time, because we didn't have these speed demons that we have today in smartphones, and the phone itself still runs pretty smoothly on most core applications. For example, here's the calculator. You can see it's very responsive, and you can see how it types pretty fast, and so there's not any issues here with calculations at all, so still pretty fast. Now the accelerometer was a bit slower, but it still did work. It still was a nice feature to have, especially for gaming purposes at the time, which of course you could download your own. Taking a look at the original iPhone, you can also notice how the back screen is black. Of course, there wasn't a wallpaper option at the time, or a notification drawer or a search bar, but you did have a contacts list, you did have more photos, you had a YouTube client for you to watch YouTube videos with. YouTube experience is still pretty good on the phone, I have to say. So you can stream it over Wi-Fi or Edge speeds, and both of them work pretty well, and you can see that it's pretty fast. Of course, playing back videos takes a bit more time now, but the phone at the time had high-speed scrubbing, which meant that you can actually scrub between different points in the device from 5 minutes perhaps to 10 minutes in a video at fairly fast speeds, and that is still inherent in this phone today. Safari web browser does a pretty good job of browsing the web. Again, by today's standards, it's going to be pretty laggy, and of course, there is no flash, so you're not going to be playing back any ads or any native built-in YouTube videos from the browser, but still a pretty impressive browser at the time, nevertheless. There's a quick Google stocks, or Apple stocks for that matter, that you could take a look at stocks at these different charts, and also you could tap on this on a particular stock to learn more information about it, and it's a pretty good experience overall. Pretty much, it's well optimized, well thought out by the manufacturer. There's also a clock application, a weather application, and also notes for you to take some quick notes with the device. Speaking of, the built-in keyboard is actually pretty interesting. So if we wanted to add a new note, you can see how the keyboard comes up and still remains pretty powerful and responsive, and the actual corrective text is still working pretty well, and surprisingly you can see how there's actually no lag at all in the keyboard, so it still works very, very well for texting. And we can rotate the device's screen, and hopefully it will rotate. Perhaps we're in a non-rotation mode at the moment, but we can also use the magnifying glass feature by long holding on a particular part to go to a certain point in our text. So it's a pretty exciting feature at the time. Of course, we didn't have cut and paste at the time, but we did have that magnifying feature. There's also iTunes down below here, of course, the phone, the iPod, SMS text message. As far as phone quality is considered, it still does make pretty good phone calls. Again, over 2G speeds are pretty sluggish, so you're not going to be browsing the web, but the microphone does a good job of picking up sound, and basically our users reported at the time and even today that we did sound like we're talking through a home phone. So it's very good audio quality, and also the speaker and also the Bluetooth quality are both pretty much impressive. Google Earth were some applications you have to download by yourself. Some other ClearCam, Sidecorder are both video recording programs that I had to install by myself, and of course you could load some different devices like status notifier, backgrounds. This was much later on. These were all apps that were developed much later on. Poppy Jump, one of the most original, one of the first applications and games available for the iOS platform, believe it or not, and one of the most popular ones even to date. And it's fun, it's easy to use, and uses accelerometer to rotate the ball to make it jump higher and higher. Labyrinth, Unblock Me Free, Paper Toss, some pretty classic games on here. Of course, it's not going to install any of the newer ones. Basically, you're stuck with the older games and the ones that you installed back when the phone was so relevant. So not that great of a multimedia device by today's standards. You won't be playing much games on here unless they have been loaded already onto the unit. But of course, you can always bootload it with more up-to-date stuff by installing Winterboard and also Installer, and then you could of course kind of hack your way around and play around with the device. Again, it's occasionally a little bit sluggish between the menu transitions, but overall still pretty responsive and snappy. So just an interesting look back. It still is a pretty good phone in today's standards. If all you are doing is making calls, doing some very light YouTube watching and browsing the web, it still does the job, I think, because the value of this phone is now very inexpensive. You can pick one up on eBay for just about next to nothing, actually. You can get one pretty much in used condition for around $40 and under. So very inexpensive for a very good piece of design. Again, it's not the fastest anymore, so you're not going to be playing too much games on here. You're not going to be browsing the New York Times every day, but for basic checking of news, weather feeds, and taking calls, it still offers plenty of style and plenty of functionality. Thanks for watching this retro review / video throwback video of the original iPhone 2G here at OS Reviews. Thank you for watching.